I'm Corey, and this is Tree Hugger. What's your name?
Laura.
And this is a baby.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be brewing our Strange Pale.
All green batch.
And then we'll also be making a summer cider with
Lemongrass and dry hops.
yeah. So right now I got sanitizer in here. We're going to turn this on. It's going to flow down through here through the plate chiller. And then gravity feed through the thermometer and then into our primary fermenter.
So in here we are using Star Sand Sanitizer, just following the directions of an ounce.
We usually use 1 ounce per 5 gallons-ish. It's pretty good stuff. Alright, so my sanitizer has flown all the way through my plate chiller, all the way through the fermenter. It has sanitized the pot, the lines, the chiller, all the lines, fermenter, everything's sanitized. Super important. If it's not sanitized, it's going to taste bad. So anything that touches the beer has to be completely sanitized, especially after it stops boiling and leaves here, starts cooling off. That is when it needs to be the cleanest. Everything needs to be perfectly sanitized. So here's my chiller. I'm going to put these caps back on here just to keep anything from falling in there. Dust, airborne wild yeast will make your beer taste sour. And unless you want that to happen, it might not be a good sour. So now, this is empty. So down in my brew pot, as I hope you can see, there is, well, the sanitizer's getting down. It's a false bottom here. This is the thermometer in the front, and this is a hop screen, which filters the wort coming out. And this is a Bayou Classic pot. Over here is my water filter, which is just hooked up to the sink. Has a garden hose thread attachment, and it's going to go through this water filter. It's basically just going to clean out any metals or anything from the water, which we live in Aurora, Colorado, so after a while your shower starts to turn pink. This water's been sitting in this thing for a few months, so I'm going to run it through here. Have the hot water on, so I know when the water gets hot coming out, then it'll be fresh water coming through. And I change that filter about once a year. Alright, that water's pretty hot coming out of the end. Stick it in the pot. And now, make sure your valve's off and let it fill up. I'm going to start with 30.87 quarts of water at heat to 150 degrees, which is 7.5 gallons. Right there. Too much water in here, and it was up to 8 gallons. And as I was draining it, it looked a little bit too full to fit the grains. So I took it down to 7. So I'm going to go ahead and try that.
So while we're prepping all of that, I like to measure out hops.
Okay, so I'm going to need a half an ounce of each of my hops for in with the mash. So I'm going to turn on my scale. Goes. Tear it off. Start with Cascade just because it's here. Half an ounce of Cascade. Smells awesome. Cascade's one of my favorite hops. Half an ounce of Amarillo. And a half an ounce of Simcoe.
Simcoe is my favorite.
Yes. It's the one with the higher alpha acid, so it definitely is the hoppiest of these three.
That's also what we're going to be using the dry hop cider, or at least the rest of that, plus something else in our collection of hops in the freezer.
Clean out the freezer. So then, just so nothing gets in there, I like to saran wrap it off. And then the bonus is I can write where it goes. This is the mash hops. So any hops that you add before 30 minutes are your bittering hops. So that's why we're going to put our most bitter hop in first. After 30 minutes, it's for flavor and aroma.
This is what takes the most time. Heating water, and as you can see, it's just barely up to 100. So that's why we're doing things like this.
Alright, so in 15 minutes, we need 0.25 of Simcoe. And I need my Irish moss, if you wouldn't mind grabbing that for me. That's the clearing agent that will make the beer nice and pretty and clear. So use a teaspoon of Irish moss.
So her mom wanted us to use Clarity Firm because she likes to be gluten-free, and what that does is cleave the proteins in the grain as it ferments and makes the gluten fall to the bottom and just drop out of it. So it's not completely gluten-free.
It's gluten reduced.
And it's gluten reduced enough that the FDA considers it gluten-free.
Alright, so our hops are ready. We will dry hop this with 1 ounce of Cascade and 1 ounce of Simcoe a week from today. So those are in the freezer waiting for next weekend.
Ooh, there's all my hops.
Alright, so here's our yeast. One is for the cider and one is for the beer. These are smack packs. Essentially, you can hear the liquid. There's nutrients in here, and there's like a little plastic pouch inside that has the yeast. So you smack it to break the little plastic pouch into the nutrients. So then it will start, you'll see it start to blow up because as it creates the chemical reaction, kind of like if you're going to do any sort of dough, it starts to get puffier as it lets out some of the gas. So you gotta just smack it. Sometimes it's hard to tell if you actually got it or not because it likes to move. I usually have better luck at this than Corey does. Yeah, I think I got it. So then you shake it up really good. And then at this point, it's good to let it start to get towards room temperature. So let's keep it out of the fridge. So this is how little and skinny it is right now. We only have a little bit of puffiness because of our altitude, but I smack the other one.
I can never find it. It always gets away.
Ooh, I think I got on the first time that time.
Yeah, right.
Here's this one. Nice and skinny. Just wait. Looks like it's going to explode by the end.
And these are both American ale yeast.
1056 from W Yeast.
Which is the equivalent to 001 California ale yeast of White Labs. That's what it is. So we went up to 160 because when you pour the grains in, it's going to lower your temperature about 10 degrees. So this is our, how many pounds is that?
A what?
15 pounds, 3.9 ounces of grain. So now that we're at temperature, take this, dump it in here, have somebody stir it.
So it doesn't make chunks.
Yeah, go slow, try not to make it clumpy.
I want the water to get in all this grain so you can get all the sugars out of there. It's like making a huge batch of oatmeal or bread at the same time. I don't know, it's like both. dump it in. Oh my gosh.
How much is in there? Look at that.
There you go.
Wood?
Yeah.
Don't put wood in your beer. Well, I guess you can if you want oak. Which I'm thinking about doing. I have some oak chips that I kind of want to use in this.
This would be like barrel aged.
To simulate oak aging. Slightly. Give it a hint.
Got lots of chunkies in here I gotta chop up. If you have ever eaten grape nuts, that's kind of what it smells like. And this is the only time you can stir the grains. So you want to make sure it's really nice and mixed up. So then you just let it steep, kind of like tea. For 45 minutes, is that what we're doing? Alrighty. Get all that sugar out of there.
Okay, I think we're good. Let's put the lid on and let that steep.
We just put the grains in. She got done stirring them all in. And we started at 160 is what we went up to. And actually it only went down 6 degrees. So we're about 4 degrees too hot, which is fine. And also this thermometer only goes in there a couple inches. So it's not super accurate, but it's pretty close. So we're just gonna go with that. We got 45 minutes to steep. Still have 14 minutes left. And it is still at just barely above 150. And this is what it's looking like. Also, while you're waiting for the grains to steep, you should heat up some sparge water to 170 degrees. So my sparger water is at 170. Actually, it's a little bit hot. That's okay. And our timer's done. So since I only have one brew kettle, I don't have a mash tun and a kettle, this serves for both. So now that it is done steeping in the mash, I have to empty the wort out into my bottling bucket. We will then clean out the grains off of the top of the false bottom, clean this out completely, and then we will put the wort back in here to boil without the false bottom. So that's what we're going to do now.
So to get gravity going, we are putting sparger water outside the refrigerator with some heating pads. It'll come down to the mash here, and we will try to let the water out the bottom about the same speed.
Yeah, we don't have any sort of proper sparging tool, so this was the best way we could come up with to do it, which seems to work. So there's wort coming out the bottom. I'm also putting 170 degree water on the top, which is going to rinse down through the grain and help rinse out any leftover fermentable sugars.
You want the water level to stay about even, which I think it's doing.
Yeah, we want it to be a little bit above the grain. Actually, I've heard of people putting like a plate or something on top of the grain so that this water doesn't stir it up. You don't really want it to stir it up, you just want it to keep the water up on top, which it is stirring it up.
If you stir it up too much, you'll get what's called a stuck mash.
If the air bubbles come out of the mash and it settles, then you're stuck with water sitting on top of your grain and nothing coming out the hose, which we've had happen before when we used rye. Rye is bad for that.
It's really fine.
Which this is stirring it up more than I want it to, but it's okay. So after everything's run out of the pot and you run out of sparge water, that's what it looks like. Just grains. Our bottling bucket is pretty full. So now we're going into the sparge pot.
Alright, so we're going to put the lids on, try to keep everything from getting contaminated.
Okay. Alrighty. That's as good as it's gonna get.
So there's a garbage can full of spent grains. And that's what's left in there I have to clean out. There is our wort back in there after the mash tun was all cleaned out. Now it's the brew kettle. Since none of our recipes, except for this one, use mash hops, and since we've never recorded a video before, we completely forgot to put the mash hops in. So we're just going to add them to the first wort hops. First wort hops, mash hops. I don't think it's going to make that much difference. You probably won't even be able to tell. But we'll find out. So I just dumped the stuff in here. It's at 140 degrees. The heat's on, and it's going in. When it gets to boiling, it's going to boil for 5 minutes. Then we're going to start the timer at 60 minutes and start our 60-minute hops. Anytime you put hops in, make sure you stir them good. I did not put the false bottom back in here because we don't need it anymore, but the hop screen still is attached to the other side of this valve. So we started with 7 gallons of water and we sparged with 3 gallons, so we had 10 gallons, and right now it is at 7.5. So that's how much water you lose in the grain. Plus we're going to boil this thing for an hour and we're going to lose some there too. So I'd imagine to have about, probably lose at least a half a gallon, approximately, maybe?
At least, yeah.
If not more, we'll see. So we're at 7.5 right now. At the end, I'll look again and see where we're at. And now we wait again. So this is the sanitizer that started in here, went through the plate chiller, went to the fermenter. This is the fermenter. This is the other fermenter, which we will be making cider in. So to conserve water and expensive sanitizer, just switch it, just siphon it from this one to the next one. There you go.
So I have a sanitized carboy over there. I have some sanitizer in my sink. Just sanitized my funnel. And now for my hard cider, I have 5 gallons of Sprouts organic apple juice. So I'm going to shake it up to get all the good stuff that floats to the bottom there. Just pour it in. Alright. There's one. 4 more to go. Alright, and there's 5. Oh, so it's very important that you get organic apple juice or apple cider. You don't want any preservatives in there because it will kill the yeast. So that's about it. Apple cider is really easy to make hard cider. We'll just put in the yeast, but I kind of want it to blow up a little bit more. This is what it looks like at this point. We'll give it that a few more minutes. But there's all the natural sugar already in there, so the yeast will eat that, poop out alcohol, and I mean, we've made a bunch of different flavors of this. We've done sweet cider where we put lactose in there to sweeten it up because yeast can't eat the lactose. We've put honey in there because that makes more fermentable sugars. We've done lavender, we've done cinnamon sticks in the fall. So this time we're going to try dry hops and lemongrass, but we'll wait a week before we put that in there. A little bit we'll just put in the yeast and wait a week. And that's it.
So we're waiting for this to boil. It's important that you keep the hops stirred up in here. So this is what it looks like right now. It's a little over 170 degrees. Smells amazing. I don't know how to help you smell it, other than you can come over and help brew. Today, I've never actually done this before. I got this, it's a 2.0 micron diffuser stone, and we're going to use this to aerate the cider. First, do not touch this. The oil from your hands, skin, will clog up the holes. If you do happen to touch it, if it's not working very good, you can boil it for about 15 minutes. It's supposed to help clean it out. Also, make sure everything's sanitized. It's definitely going to go in to the wort, beer, cider, whatever that is not boiling. Alright, then we're going to go straight over. Now that, stick this in here. And turn this on. Wow, that's going pretty good. And you want to do that for about a minute. I'm going to go a minute since I'm using pure oxygen. The way that we used to do this before was we had a cordless drill. With this, you put this in the drill, you stick it in there, when you spin it, these come open, they mix it all in real good, it sucks in atmosphere, which does not have very much oxygen in it. It works, but it doesn't work very good. This is a million times more efficient way to do it. Never done this before. I've also never been able to control the temperature of my fermentation. So this and this should turn out awesome. Watch your foam. And this is approaching, it's just over 200 degrees. Very important, watch this when it gets close to boiling. If you have this lid on here, it will boil over and make a huge mess. And it's very sticky because it's full of fermentable sugars.
Minute's up.
Oh, minute's up, this is done. Stir this often. So this is actually boiling. It's just barely over 200 degrees. It's boiling right now. I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. Pre-boil time.
Alright. While he's doing that, I'm going to put my yeast in. As you can see, it's ready. There's like no more space left in here. So be careful when you cut this open because it will splash you. Kind of make it a nice edge so you can pour easily. So 1 billion yeast cells are going in. You might want to put a little bit of this distilled water in here to kind of rinse it out. Get all those yeast. Alrighty. We're gonna put the lid on the fermentation here and see it in a week. Ta-da!
Alright, our 5 minutes is up. Got a nice boil going on here. Gonna stir in our 60-minute hops. And then since I don't have any more hops going until 30 minutes, I'm gonna set my timer for 30 minutes. There those go. Stir them in. tends to boil a little bit like that after you throw in some hops, so be careful for that. Timer's going for 30 minutes. We'll see you then.
Now we're at 30 minutes. Put the hops in, stir them up. Oh yeah. The next one is 15 minutes, so I'm going to set it for 15. Now we're at 15 minutes. Penguin bowl. Put it in, stir it up. Our next one is going to go in at 10 minutes, so set your timer for 5 minutes because we're at 15 right now. Ten minutes. Set your timer for another 5 minutes because that's when the next one goes in. And then that'll be it for hops. 5 minutes. So we got about 4 minutes left. Still boiling. So now I have my wort line going to my plate chiller, which is hooked up to the sink. So wort goes here, wort in, wort out, comes out, goes through here so I can see the temperature of it coming out and I can adjust it. That goes into my fermenter, which is sanitized. This is just because we're paranoid about wild yeast getting in there. So nothing can possibly get in there and contaminate that. There's also that fine mesh bag I showed you before is on the end of the hose to filter anything out that might get through. So this wort in is water out. So water is coming in this side. Cold water is coming in the cold side. And it's coming through, picking up heat. It's from this hot wort, which is basically 200 degrees. Hot water is coming out. It's just going down the drain because I don't really have a use for it right now, and I have nowhere to store hot water. I'm not bringing it today. So anyway, it's counterflow. Hot in, cold out. This is cold in, hot out. They're going opposite directions. So we got about 2.5 minutes left, and we'll begin the whirlpool before we do any of this.
Alright, there goes the timer. It's done. Turn off the heat. And we are at about 6.5 gallons. What do we start with? 7?
7? I think 7.
So we did lose a half gallon.
So the centrifugal force of the whirlpool will push everything out to the side, and there is a small section between the whirlpool and the edge where there is no flow, I guess is the best way to describe it, where when it gets to that, it just falls straight down. So you want to spin it like this. You want to try to do it for 5 minutes, but that's kind of a long time. Normally we'll use the drill in that stir aerator I showed you earlier, but we don't have a drill right now. So this is what we're doing, which still works just fine. And anything that doesn't settle out will get caught in the hop screen. Anything that doesn't get caught in that will get caught in the bag. Anything that doesn't get caught in that will settle out to the bottom, and we will take care of when we transfer it to the secondary fermenter, which will be a week from now. So don't expect that anytime soon. Alright, it's not exactly the best whirlpool I've ever seen, but it will suffice for this little batch. We'll just try this out. I'm sure it'll work just fine. And now we will set the timer for 20 minutes. Alright, well, our 20 minutes is over. So, I'm going to start the cold water going. So cold water is coming in here. Hot water is coming out that way. I'll start this going slowly. goes.
And it's at 68 degrees.
So right now it's coming out of here at 190. Going through the plate chiller. I have it going slow enough that we're right at 68, about 68 degrees, which is perfect. And it's going through that fine mesh bag on the way out there. And I'm controlling this temperature. I have the cold water on all the way. I'm controlling the temperature by how fast the hot wort comes out of here. So I just turned it up a little bit. That's still pretty good. Now it's going up. It's about 74-ish. Just a little bit warm. And this yeast, we want it to be about 68. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit. And as you can see, now it's down to about 72, 70, just about perfect.
Alright, so the other smack pack that I put with the hard cider, we smacked these at the same time. This is about an hour later. And look at this, like you can't even squeeze it. That's pretty ridiculous. That's...
Don't shake it!
Ah! It's gonna explode. Nope,
It's like when you shake it, you can feel it getting bigger. That's crazy.
So, that's what we're gonna put in there. It's definitely working.
So right there is all that's going to come out of there. You can't really see, but that hop screen isn't all the way down. It's not to the complete bottom of the pot. So all that shit on the bottom there is from the whirlpool. That's hops and Irish moss and any grain that was left over in anything. So that is how much we actually got out of there. That is how much came out by whirlpooling it. Even though it didn't look like we were stirring it that much and it wasn't really whirlpooling, still that much fell out of it. And she's just getting the rest of it out of the hose and the plate chiller. And there's my fine mesh bag. We'll pull that out of there in a second. See how much stuff is in that too.
Yeah, right about 5 gallons there.
So we're going to start with 7.5 gallons. Sparge with 3 gallons. And that is about perfect. That's probably slightly over 5 gallons. 5 1/4, maybe 5 1/2.
Alright, well let's oxygenate this. You still got a little bit in this bag.
Yeah.
Not
So
a
the
lot.
whirlpool took a lot. Like that thing used to be full before we started whirlpooling.
Yeah, there's just a tiny bit left in there.
And I learned that from, I used to go over to Breckenridge Brewery after work at midnight and brew with those guys for a couple hours. They had a special tank just for whirlpooling.
Alright. I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to set the timer. Again, we are going to oxygenate for 1 minute. Ooh. Is that going to overflow?
Maybe. You should probably turn it down.
How do I do that? I don't know how this thing works.
Let's turn it down.
They always say if you don't make a mess, you're not doing it right.
That's alright. Just let it go. We'll clean it up.
Alrighty. There's a minute.
I just stick that thing straight in the sanitizer to keep it clean. So this is called a refractometer. So what you do, you just take, basically you just need 1-2 drops. I just kind of get that all wet there. Flip this down. You You look through it to the light, adjust this here to focus, and looks like it's at 1.056, which is lower than I like to have it, which is always my problem. But we're gonna go with it right now. I know we didn't do this with the cider. We should have, and we can still do it. Always tastes the wort. It always tastes the same.
No matter what you're making. Get the last of these 100 billion yeast cells out of here. Alright, go ahead and put your lid on.
So this fermenter is going to get the thermocouple from the temperature controller for the freezer, which is going to hang down in here, and it's going to measure the temperature of the center of the beer, and it's going to control the freezer temperature accordingly to keep that at 68 degrees. Which I already put the cider down there. We'll go down there in a minute. This is Aerate. I got it to fit in there earlier. There we go. Alright, let's take this thing downstairs, put it in the freezer, and stick the thermocouple in there. My sister got me this for my birthday. This is a temperature controller that I've never actually used before. And I got a free freezer that we're going to be using to ferment this. Alright, so this is my freezer that I got for free. And this is my temperature controller. I wish I could turn the light on this thing. There you go. Sorry. And I know you can't see right now, but it is at 72 because I had it in my hand. So what I'm going to do is this is a spray bottle of sanitizer. Anything I stick in the beer I spray. I hope this thing still works. Alright, so my spray bottle doesn't work anymore. So what I'm going to do is just stick this in here. Stick the cord in there as far as it's going to touch the beer. So that has sanitizer all over it. I'm going to stick this in the cap in the other hole. So this hole in this lid is in an inconvenient place. So I'm going to have to stick it in here as I'm shutting it. Alright. So I tried to get that thermocouple so that it's down towards the center of the beer. The controller will control the temperature of the freezer to the center temperature of the beer, which should be the same for the other one over there. So we're only controlling it off of one. So it's down in there. Right now it is 70 degrees. And it's set for 68 with a differential of 1 degree. So if it gets up to 69, it won't turn on. If it gets up to 70, it'll turn on. So it's the first time we've ever done this. So we will see how this works. And we'll come back to this in a week. We will transfer these to the secondary fermenters.
And dry hop.
And dry hop and dry lemongrass.
Yes.
So,
all right.
So anyway, thanks for watching our brewing video.
We'll see you guys in a week.